Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining me today. We are going to do a wrap up of the 16 books I read in January. I'll tell you a little bit about each book and then who I would or would not recommend the book to. If 16 books seems like a lot, it's because it is. That's a pretty, I would say, unusually high number for me. I usually read 10 to 12 books a month. I will say 2 of these were kind of pseudo duplicates. It'll make sense when we get there. And then one is actually a children's book, which I wouldn't normally count, but again, I'll explain when we get there. So I would say like 13 full-length books. Still like a lot. January is a long month. I also didn't really have anything going on with work this month, so I got a lot of reading in. February into March will slow down a bit, but that's okay. I'm really not like a numbers person. As long as I'm reading the books that I want to read and enjoying them, like I'm having a good time, even if it's 5 books a month. Am I getting my 26 and 26 list? Am I reading the books that I'm putting on my monthly TBRs? Like those are the things that the goals, I would say, the numbers goals that I actually really care about. And I did hit my TBR goal this month. I put 10 books on the list. I read all 10. I do like themed TBRs generally most months. January's theme was a little loose, maybe. I had a ton of books that I had suspended the hold on Libby. If you didn't know, on Libby, which is like the library's ebook and audiobook app, when your book comes up on hold, if you don't want it right then, you can suspend it and you can get it, come back to it later. But I had, I think, like 8 to 10 books that I had suspended. They were just all piled up. Plus I had other, it was too much. It was kind of starting to stress me out a little bit. So at the beginning of the month, I was like, everything is coming unsuspended and I have to read it in January, or I'm just gonna have to let it go and come back to it later. So I did make it through all of those. Of course, in the course of the month of me reading those, older holds moved up the list, and so now I think I have 5 to 6 that are again suspended. It's like a never-ending cycle, but it's fine. I met my goal. It's all good. So I'm gonna go a little bit in order and tell you about the books. Sometimes it's like I read the first and second in a series and it doesn't make sense to split them up, but mostly these are in the order that I read them. I'm just gonna talk a little bit about each one. If you want more info, a lot of these books are featured in reading vlogs from January. So I think if you go back and look at the last 3 vlogs, you can get some more in-depth info about some of these books that I read. Starting with The Tainted Cup, which was the first book I read this year, and then I also read the second in the series, A Drop of Corruption. I absolutely loved these books. Yeah, I'm kind of obsessed. They are like procedural murder mysteries, but set in this fantasy world. The fantasy aspect is so interesting. I would say the vibes of the series overall, if you're looking for, okay, what's the vibe of the series? Again, procedural murder mystery, so that's important, but also there's a little bit of kind of grotesque body horror. There's genetically modified plants and people. You will hear the book compared a lot to the Sherlock Holmes stories because there is like a investigator and investigator's assistant duo, and they definitely have some Sherlock and Watson sort of dynamics. So definitely that's a great comp to go from if you like those sorts of stories but want a fantasy setting. This would be great for you. I would say the genetically modified makes me think a lot about the TV series Orphan Black. If you liked that series, this has a lot of that same kind of grotesque body modification stuff. The kind of darker fantasy with a mystery element reminds me a lot of the Night Cowl series by Leigh Bardugo. There's 2 of those books out. Actually, the 3rd one comes out this year. I think that's a good comp. I also think the Hollow Kingdom series, it's Duology by Kira Jane Buxton, again has a little bit of that sort of like, it's not horror by any means, I would say, but it's just a little grotesque is the word that I can think of, but also humorous. There's a lot of humor in Hollow Kingdom. These books are funny as well, so really recommend. Definitely like keep an eye out for pretty heavy language content as far as violence, not super explicit sexual content, but some of that as well. So just keep that in mind. So next is the children's book. So I read Coyote's Wild Home by Lily and Barbara Kingsolver. Barbara Kingsolver, if you have watched even one video on my channel, Barbara Kingsolver has probably come up because she is my favorite writer like of all time. She's written, I think, 18 books, and I'm on a quest to read everything she's ever written, including things like her children's book. This was really sweet. I mean, I don't really read children's literature a lot of time. I guess I should say I tracked it because I have like a challenge that I set up on Storygraph where it lists every single book that she has written, and I wanted to be able to track it on Storygraph so I could check it off. So that's why I tracked it, even though it's like 30 pages or something, and most of those are pictures. But this is a really sweet book. Barbara Kingsolver writes a lot about nature. She writes a lot set in the Appalachian Mountains. There's a lot of crossover between Barbara Kingsolver's work and Braiding Sweetgrass, Robin Wall Kimmerer's work. They both care a lot about nature. And I would say, like, if you have a child in your life that you want to teach about balanced ecosystems and concepts like the honorable harvest, the concept of predator and prey, how humans come into that equation, I think this would be a really good resource for that. Next book I read, this was a library checkout. This was a totally random, just plucked it off the shelf library find, and I love it when that happens, and then it just is such a fabulous book. I read The White Mosque by Sofia Samatar. This is a creative nonfiction, so think nonlinear timeline. It's a blend of memoir, history, kind of sociology, anthropology, which just a lot of those things all combined in together. Think Hanif Abdurraqib's writing, where it's sort of history, sort of memoir, although his is about music, or like H is for Hawk by Helen Macdonald, which that book was more about this bird, but also about the history of falconry, her relationship, losing her father, all these sorts of things. So in this one, what Samatar is exploring is the history of the Mennonite people, specifically Mennonites who left Russia and ended up settling in Central Asia and modern day Uzbekistan. Samatar goes on a kind of pilgrimage to go see the land that these old Mennonites traveled in. She herself is a Mennonite, but she has a very interesting kind of cultural blend in that her father is a Somali Muslim and her mother is a Swiss Mennonite. So she has a very mixed cultural, racial, religious identity. So she's kind of trying to reconcile that while also telling these people's stories. It was so good. So if you like that sort of creative nonfiction type of storytelling, like those books I mentioned, then I think you'll like this. I'd say if you're doing like a reading around the world challenge and need a book for Uzbekistan, this would be a good one. Samatar is not from Uzbekistan, but I think this is still a good fit because she talks a lot about the land and the history there. Also, if you have any sort of interest in like religious history or cults, the Mennonites themselves are not a cult, but this group of Mennonites that did kind of make this pilgrimage into Asia was led by this kind of crazy, frankly, like cult-like sort of guy. If you love a cult book, this might not quite go far enough for you and what you want, but maybe you would find it slightly interesting. So highly recommend that book. Loved it so much. Next up, Wuthering Heights. So I have a whole video talking about this book. I didn't like it. I didn't really have a good time with it. I understood it. I think a lot of people are reading this book right now because the movie's coming out, and a lot of people are like, I just don't get it, which is fair. I really understand why they would feel that way. I got it. I just didn't like it. But if you are the type of person that wants to read the book before the movie, you could give it a shot. I will say, like, if you're not used to reading a lot of classics, I really don't think you will enjoy this. This is not an easy or accessible classic, I would say. This is pretty difficult. I'm finding it hard to even think about who I would recommend this to because I didn't like it. Read Jane Eyre instead. Sorry, that's all I've got for you. Okay, next we have my first 5-star of the year. I've talked about a lot of other books I loved. They were mostly like 4.5 stars, but my first 5-star of the year was Lightbreakers by Aisha Gabel. I love Aisha Gabel. She is 2 for 2 with the 2 books that she's published now being 5 stars for me. This book is like literary science fiction. So if that sounds really interesting to you, think like Slaughterhouse-Five, although this book isn't as weird as Slaughterhouse-Five, or Hyperion, Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro, Ministry of Time by Kayleigh Bradley is a great comp for this book. Station 11 for sure. Emily St. John Mandel, if you like her books, then I think you should really give Lightbreakers a try. They're pretty similar, although Lightbreakers has a more straightforward storytelling style. There's still some non-linearity because it's about time travel, so that's just kind of the nature of it, but it's not quite as puzzly and obscure as Emily St. John Mandel's book tend to be. But the writing, like the literariness, the beauty of the writing in the storytelling, how it has a little bit of a thriller feel, even though it's pretty character driven, those things are the same. I will also say there's a lot about a troubled marriage in this book, and I was trying to think of comps I could give for literary fiction about troubled marriages or troubled relationships, and I'm like, that's kind of all literary fiction. So I think the best comp would be like, if you enjoy literary fiction and are looking for something great in that genre, totally read Lightbreakers. But if the idea of a literary science fiction sounds good to you, like, you cannot miss this book. It is just so So gorgeous. Huge trigger warning though. A man loses his young child in this, and the death isn't necessarily explored in detail. I mean, it kind of is, but it's not like a gruesome death or anything. It's more the grief and the emotional aftermath of it. I don't have a child. I've never lost a child, and it still was like pretty heavy for me to wade through. So just please keep that in mind and take care. Okay, next we have to talk about my fun project that I'm doing this spring, which is reading the Lord of the Rings series. So I made it through the first 2 books, these beauties. And and these are the 2 that I was talking about that are like kind of duplicates. My husband and I have been listening to on literal cassette tape on a tape player these abridged radio adaptations. They're like 4 hours or so a piece, so I've been tracking them because I'm like, I mean, that is a book, that's book length, but I wanted to also read the books, so I kind of have tracked both. In addition to this, we're also watching each of the movies, the extended editions of the movies. I'm loving this so much. I don't want to talk too much about it because I'm planning a totally different video where I'm just gonna vlog like all about Lord of the Rings, the movies, the books, the tapes, all of it. Suffice to say, I'm obsessed. I'm having a great time. I was really worried. I had heard people say like, they're so slow, they're so boring. They're slow. They are slow. Listen, I'll give you that. But they are not boring. They're so good. Tolkien's writing is so good. The story, classic, timeless. I will say, if all you read is kind of contemporary fantasy, I could see where this would be a bit of a stretch, a bit of a bore, a slog. I get it. But I do totally recommend these. I think you can find like the whole thing. It's on YouTube or online or something. You don't have to have, you know, the cassettes and a cassette player to listen to them. They're really fun. Again, like full cast with sound effects and music. And I think they would be really great to listen to as a family. Like if you have kids that you're wanting to get into Lord of the Rings, these would, I think, be really good. They're also a good, easy introduction to Tolkien's writing style because they do kind of lift the words right out of the books, but they take out the extensive description. I don't necessarily, I think, need to talk in depth about who I would recommend the Lord of the Rings to. I think you could just kind of self-identify whether you wanted to. I will say another series that I find similar-ish to the Lord of the Rings, that's a more contemporary version of it, is the Winternight trilogy by Catherine Arden. It starts with the Bear and the Nightingale. Little kind of slower paced, a young, scrappy protagonist underdog. I mean, I know Frodo isn't young, but he's, you know, small. Very outdoorsy, like a strong connection to the land, the forest. There's lots of kind of traveling. So I think those could be good comps for one another. Like if you liked one, maybe try the other. So back to a Kindle book and back to some literary fiction. I read Heart the Lover, which is the new book out from Lily King. I love Lily King. I think this is my 3rd book I finished by her. I DNF'd her short story collection. I would love to go back to it. It just wasn't the right time. And I think also I was listening to it on audio, which was not the right way for me to do that. So I have finished 3 books of her now. I really, really like her writing. I just think she's a fabulous writer. I think this is probably my least favorite of the 3. It's hard to explain why without giving spoilers. And honestly, it's even hard to recommend it without giving spoilers. I will say, if you have never read Lily King before, don't start here. I know that this is her newest book and the one that most people are talking about, so it might be the one most on your radar, but I would not have this be the first Lily King book that you read. Go back and maybe read some of her other more popular books from before. That's all I'll say. I'm trying to be if you've read it, then you know what I'm talking about. Trying to be careful. I will say for some other comps, like the book I would say is most similar to this that I've read is Normal People by Sally Rooney. Very much just about the relationship between these people and a relationship kind of full of like miscommunication and bad timing. And I know that sounds kind of annoying, and I don't always like books based around miscommunication, but in these instances, it's believable why things are so difficult. I would also say like this book, the first half of it or so is a very kind of campus novel-y. So that reminds me a lot of Normal People. Another literary fiction that I read recently that also the first half is a campus novel and then it follows them into adulthood is Deep Cuts. Deep Cuts, Heart the Lover, and Normal People are a great kind of trio around this sort of literary fiction subgenre. So if you like any of those, try the others, but again, read previous Lily King books first. Next, we have this book's poetry collection. I read at least one collection of poetry a month, and this month it was the Collected Sonnets of Edna St. Vincent Millay. I liked these, didn't love them. With any sort of kind of collected edition where it's a bunch, it's not just kind of one small book, which is normally, I would say most poetry collections, the smaller ones are 90 to 100 pages, and this one was 160. So it's 160 sonnets back to back to back. And it just kind of got a lot. They're all kind of about the same thing. Either this one man did her so wrong, like over and over and over again, or she was just continually getting her heart broken by a series of different men, because 80% of these poems are about heartbreak. It got a little much after a while. I definitely wouldn't recommend this for like a poetry newbie. If you just are desperate to read some sonnets, then please read Sonnets from the Portuguese. It's one of my favorite books ever, but definitely one of my favorite sonnet collections. If you're just getting into poetry, we'll talk about it another time. I feel like I kind of want to make another video of just like, here's where to start with poetry, but I would definitely start with a contemporary poet over something like Edna St. Vincent Millay. There is one that was really fun that I wanted to read you. Oh, oh, you will be sorry for that word. Give back my book and take my kiss instead. Was it my enemy or my friend I heard? What a big book for such a little head. Come, I will show you now my newest hat, and you may watch me purse my mouth and prink. Oh, I shall love you still and all of that. I never again shall tell you what I think. I shall be sweet and crafty, soft and sly. You will not catch me reading any more. I shall be called a wife to pattern by, and some day when you knock and push the door, some sane day, not too bright and not too stormy, I shall be gone, and you may whistle for me. That one's really good. I liked that one. Next, two bangers back to back. I read The Listeners by Maggie Stiefvater, which I talked about in my last video. This book was so much fun. Historical fiction set in a luxury hotel in West Virginia, a little bit of magical realism. If you really liked The Appalachian Connection, sorry to keep bringing her up, but Barbara Kingsolver has a lot of really good Appalachian books. Also, this book is set in a hotel. If you loved the hotelness of it all, A Gentleman in Moscow by Amor Towles is a great comp. But in general, if you're just looking for kind of unique, interesting historical fiction, a little off the beaten path, I mean, it came out last year, and I know some people are talking about it, but I don't hear a lot of people talking about this book. It's a little under the radar, I would say, at least in my bookish circles. Maybe you've heard everybody talking about it, but I certainly have not. So I would love for more people to read this book. If even one more person reads The Listeners because of this, I will be happy. Now, a new release that came out last year that everybody has been talking about, and for good reason, is Wild Dark Shore by Charlotte McConaughey. It was as good as everybody was saying. If you're like, I don't know, is it really as good as everybody's been saying? Yeah, it kind of is. It kind of is. So I mentioned Lightbreakers is a literary sci-fi. This is like literary cli-fi. If you haven't heard of cli-fi, it's what people are calling climate fiction or eco-fiction. So think All the Water in the World or Parable of the Sower, where it's not so much science fiction, it's more like, hey, what if the Earth continues on this trajectory that it's very clearly on, and we come to a genuine crisis in the climate where islands are flooding or crazy storms are endangering people's... I mean, what's crazy is this is already happening. I'm talking like this might happen in the future, but it is literally happening right now. Sorry, just had to scream into the void a little bit about that. So think like Day After Tomorrow. You know, that's an older reference. Sorry if you're Gen Z and you're like, what are you talking about? But that movie was a banger in, I guess it was the mid-early 2000s when it came out. The tension in that movie is more though about like the event that's happening and are we going to survive? Wild Dark Shore, there are like big storms and climate-y events, but the tension is more interpersonal. If you don't know the setup, this family live on this really isolated island, and one day this woman washes up on shore and everybody's like, why are you here? And she's like, well, why are you here? And they're like, no, ask you first. We as the reader don't know what's happening either. You know, sometimes when you're reading like a thriller or a mystery, we have all the information and we're just trying to watch the characters catch up and figure it out. We don't know anything either. You don't know who to trust. Everybody's stuck on this island. So if you like stuck on an island thriller and you want something a little more literary, this would be great for you. If you just want to go cry, have I got a book for you? I was verklempt. Oh my god, I was weeping. Like, yeah, unwell. Really good. Really recommend, for sure. I read Symphony for the City of the Dead. I don't remember the subtitle off the top of my head, I think it might be like Dmitri Shostakovich and the Siege of Leningrad or something. This is a nonfiction book. It is, as it says, about Dmitri Shostakovich and the Siege of Leningrad. Well, sorta. I liked the book. I didn't love it. As far as recommending, only if you have a niche interest into classical music history like I do, and even then, if you want to learn more about classical music history like in the 20th century, I would totally say read The Rest is Noise first. I felt like the author was kind of trying to play up some of the drama about this, when really this was just kind of a very straightforward retelling of Shostakovich's life, specifically the 2 periods that he spent under Stalin's Great Terror, as well as in World War II. He wasn't even in Leningrad the whole time. Like, they airlifted him out, or put him on a train. I think it was a train. Anyway, some of the marketing and the things around this book felt a little misleading to me. I learned something, so that's something, I guess. There is another book around this same topic, the Siege of Leningrad, that is called, I think, City of Thieves, that I haven't read, but it's on my TBR, and it's a fiction book, so I think that would be a good comp as well. The last book that I read was Catabasis by R.F. Kuang. This is the first R.F. Kuang book I have finished. I DNF'd Babel last year. I did not like it. I thought it was very boring. This book was not boring. You know, if you've heard other people talking about this book, there's a lot of dialogue around, oh my gosh, it's super heady and academic and tricky to understand, and you have to read Dante's Inferno first, and like, girl, I'm here to tell you that's a lie. This book is a very straightforward, like, adventure, kind of pseudo-romance fantasy. There are some classic and literary allusions, which I think if you know them, it might enrich your reading experience, but you do not have to know them in order to get this story. It is very straightforward, which honestly I liked, because my issue with Babel was that it felt like she had an interesting concept and some issues and topics that she wanted to discuss, but the story itself wasn't any good. But in this one, I felt like we had a better synthesis of like concept, issues she wants to address, and a story that is propulsive and keeps me going forward. So that's why this one I think worked for me more. As I was thinking about who to recommend this to, I mean, it's just a big popular book right now, so again, maybe you don't need a specific recommendation, but I was thinking a little bit about how a lot of people are saying this is super academic fantasy, which it sort of is. I haven't heard anybody call it romantasy, because it's not quite romantasy, but again, it is a romance fantasy in my opinion. So I was thinking about a spectrum and where I would put Catabasis on the spectrum of, wait, let me think. Are we reversed? So is this left and this right? I don't remember. I'm not gonna gesture with my hands because I'm probably gonna get it right. I'll like put a graph up on the screen. So I created a spectrum all the way from this is academic romantasy to this is just straight academic fantasy, and where I think Catabasis goes. So this may make sense as we go. Hopefully you understand. All the way at like academic romantasy, meaning romantasy set in like an academic sort of setting, fourth wing. Okay. That's hardly even academic, but it's set at a school. Discovery of Witches is the most like, it's very, very romance heavy. You know, it's set in academia and follows a lot of academic concepts and people who are academics, not just at a school, they're academics. Then Emily Wilde, Ninth House, The Starless Sea, which I would say is my best comp for Catabasis, because right after The Starless Sea, I would put Catabasis. Then I would put Babel, then Piranesi, and Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. So Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell is by far the most academic fantasy book I've ever read. Catabasis is nowhere near that level of academic. Catabasis is just as close to Emily Wilde as it is to Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, in my opinion. Some people might disagree. This is just the way that I read the book. I don't know if that even makes any sense. Hopefully it's helpful, because I know there's a lot of people talking about this book right now. I think a lot of like conflicting opinions and I think information going on around this book. So hopefully that gives you some clarity. If you haven't read it yet, it gives you a better idea of whether it is or is not for you based on your interests. But I will say, like, if you love academic fantasy, something like Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, and maybe you want something lighter, this would be great. Or if you read a lot of romantasy and are like wanting to dip your toe into something a little more literary, this would also be great, because it's kind of meeting in the middle between those two. So there we have it. A really, really good reading month. I did finish everything on my TBR. It's so satisfying. Oh yeah, I should talk about DNFs. I DNF'd A Most Remarkable Creature by Jonathan Meiberg. It was a nonfiction I was listening to about this bird that lived like off the coast of South America. It was just boring, and I think I had like 8 hours left in the audiobook, and I just thought, girl, I can't do this. I can't do this. So I DNF'd. The other book I DNF'd was another nonfiction. This was actually an ARC I had from NetGalley, and it was on my like anticipated releases for the year, so I'm a little upset. It's Opera Wars by Caitlin Vincent. Niche to me, again, in my interests. I just didn't think it was written for me. I think this would be actually a pretty decent fit for people who don't know a lot about opera but are maybe wanting to learn more. But opera is my work. Like, it is literally my job. So I know a lot about it. Most of what she was talking about was just really repetitive. Like, I really didn't need an opera history or like, this is what singers go through to learn how to sing opera. I'm like, yeah, I know. Like, it's my job. That's what I do. I would still recommend it if you're like curious about opera, want to learn a little bit more about it. Her writing style is pretty, I would say, conversational, definitely more for, I would say, an audience that doesn't know as much about opera. So check that out if you're interested. There we have it. 16 books. Some really, really good ones. My 2 5-stars for the month were The Fellowship of the Ring and Lightbreakers. I'm looking forward to finishing up the Lord of the Rings series, hopefully soon. Again, I'll have a video out for all of those. I also am excited about dipping into my February TBR. My theme for February, I do this every year, is reading for Black History Month. Although this month I'm also reading authors from Africa and the African diaspora because I'm doing this like read around the world challenge this year. So I have some fabulous, fabulous books on my TBR. You will definitely see those in some upcoming vlogs, so keep an eye peeled for those. Thank you so much for hanging out today. Let me know in the comments what your favorite book was that you read in January. Maybe I will add it to a future TBR. Thanks so much again for hanging out. I will see y'all next time.